Magic moments when two hearts are caring.
Well, the wedding day started with me in the very early morning, and I was billeted in a house, 2 houses down from where my future in-laws lived. And one of my future bride's best friends, male, very, very fine fellow, and I met him before. He came in about 10:30, and I was sitting in this room, bed, just a bed and a dresser and so on, waiting for the hours to pass until I went to the church. And was it Bill Dreamer?
Mm-hmm.
Bill Dreamer said, "You know something? You could use a Manhattan." And I said, "Right on." So he had all the ingredients, and we sat there and tumbled a few, and I felt just a little better, and nerves were calm and so forth. And it's a giant step, but at that point, my concern was two things. One is, will my family arrive on time, and will Brother Bill and my mother and so forth be there with smiles and understand that this is a wedding and joyful and so forth. And my best man, of course, was my brother Jim, and actually he wasn't any help at all. Basically, he came in typical Jim, very dashing young guy, but Bill Dreamer was really my support.
Mm.
So we had one more Manhattan within 2 hours before, and I eventually came to the church and stood on the altar and waited for my bride.
The church that we were married in was called St. Mary's, yes. And it was a beautiful little church. I don't know how many people it held. My father was was up in the choir. He was the only singer, I think, most of the time. Yeah, the soloist with Mrs. Farley, the organist, was. But the church did have a lot of significance. My family, of course, all prayed there, as they say, and later on in life, Sherry and Johnny and Bob went to school there for those few months that they were there.
Right.
They were all of our children except Tom were baptized there with Father Sergel. So before, this actually had a lot of significance. We were we were in the church, Dad and I, we could walk from the house to the church. And so we walked over. It had snowed and sleeted and iced that whole week before. And they were all coming from Long Island. So we waited, and they were late in coming, weren't they, John?
Yes, they were.
But you were up front with your brother. Aunt Mary Ann, Uncle Jim, and 2 of my friends were in the wedding party, and 2 of your friends. Church was absolutely magnificent. It was Christmas, and church, had not all the decorating, so my parents didn't have to put the flowers out. What? We were on time. Dad was down below. The wedding went off when they finally arrived from Long Island. Everything went off fine. It wasn't a mass, it was just a ceremony. Mother didn't want a mass, and I didn't know any different anyway. So coming back, there was a fellow called George Deal, who was the druggist at whose store I worked. Everyone loved George. He was on the side. Dad was coming back, and he looked like he was going to his funeral. He was so sad, as you'll see in our pictures, and he looked kind of almost mad. And George kept saying, "John, smile, for God's sake, smile." So he finally did. But we went to the hotel for our reception, and it was just a typical reception in those days. My Uncle Frank got drunk, of course, and but Mother and Dad and Grandma, everyone did what they had to do. And then your brother drove us in the rain, I guess, to Dover.
Our honeymoon was planned in such a way that had to be quick as far as time, because both of us were in college, going to school. You were at Centenary, and I was at Hunter College, and classes started, I believe, on the 2nd or 3rd of January, and this is now the 28th of December. So my brother Jim, being the best man, drove us to church. Drove us to Dover, New Jersey, where we picked up a train and we went into New York. And we had reservations at the Pennsylvania Hotel, which was at that time the place to go. It was, if you remember Glenn Miller, Pennsylvania 5000, and he wrote a song about that. And the Cafe Rouge was there, and we wanted to spend a couple nights there, and then go from there to a chariot drive in the park. Where was it?
The nightclub, the Morocco.
And we went to
Morocco.
Spend in New York City at our honeymoon. So when we got to the Pennsylvania Hotel, they said they did not have reservations. We had confirming reservations, so they put us up in the Commodore, which was across the street, for one night. So our good old brother Bill gave us a magnum of champagne. And that night, we popped the magnum, and my young bride had about 2 or 3 glasses, and my recollection is that she talked on into the night until 2 or 3 in the morning. And we were, I think part of that was pretty well consumed, or part of the champagne, of course. The next morning, we were advised that we now had reservation for rooms at the Pennsylvania Hotel. So we moved over there, and I think we went in the afternoon, and Jimmy Dorsey was there with Helen O'Connell and Bob Everly. And we couldn't wait to have dinner and enjoy the band and then dance, and this is what we were looking for. It was just a wonderful romantic environment, and we planned it that way. When we were getting ready to go to dinner, at the first sitting, I was at 7 o'clock, and there was a knock on our door, and I opened it up, and much to my complete surprise was my brother Jim. And the first thing he said to me was, quote, "Do you have an extra shirt? I would like to take a shower." And I looked at him and I said, "Jim, this is our honeymoon. What is going on?" Well, I relented. He came in, whatever, got his shower, put his shirt on. And within 10 seconds after that, he said, "Would you mind if Bobby Robinson comes in?" It was his buddy.
Out in the hall.
He was out in the hall. So he came in. So we all said, "Well, all right, have you eaten?" No, we didn't eat. So Jim said, "Well, let's go down and get a table." I said, "I have a reservation for 2. We'll make it for how many?" "You better make it for 6. 6, he had picked up a girl at the Cafe Rouge. Bobby had a girlfriend, so we all went and had dinner. Now, knowing my brother Jim, he had money and no problems and so forth. So we had a beautiful dinner, we had drinks, we danced. Jim's date, I don't know how many scotches she had, but it was plenty. So the waiter came over with the maitre d' and said, are you going to stay for the next session, which starts at 9 o'clock? Or we will then, if you don't, we'll give you the bill, etc. So I turned around to my brother and I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, well, we're gonna have to probably leave, and we'll let you go on to the second sitting. You didn't have to buy dinner, but you could dance at 9 o'clock till 12. So I said, all right, we'll square away on the bill. And Jim turned around and said to his buddy, how much money do you have, Bobby? And he said, I got $8. My brother had 15. The bill came to over $350. And we had $500 as a present for my brother Bill for a honeymoon. So the next morning, we signed, right?
A couple of days later.
A couple days later, we signed out. We went to the Morocco and so forth. But a couple days later, we signed out and we went back to West Salem. And my mom said, what are you doing here? So that is my recollection of our honeymoon.
When total shock when Jim, of course it was typical Jim, you know, he was kind of thoughtless, young, and when you told me about the bill and he didn't have any money, or hardly any, and we had to pay, I said, well, you know, we only have so much money and we wanted to do all these different things in New York. We never did get the carriage ride, but we did go to the Morocco and dance, which was very famous then. And we stayed, I think, another day and a half actually, and took the train. We had enough money for the train back to Sayville, and that was it. So when we got to Grandma's house, I don't know how we got from the train there, and she said, what are you doing here? And I remember I said, we ran out of money. How did you run out of money? I think she knew about the $500. So we didn't go into detail. We just said, well, Jim appeared and we had to do something with the meal, I guess. That was our honeymoon. We got to cut it short for him. And the day, many years later, never apologized, never paid us back, of course. That was a brotherly thing to do, I guess he thought. And that was the end of it. So that was our honeymoon. So when you all sent us to Bermuda on our 40th anniversary, I think, they said, this is for the honeymoon you never had. They all got together and sent us over there, so which was nice.
Which was nice.
Yeah. So we had a little of New York and a little of Bermuda.
We were on Lenox Road in Huntington, and on our first house. And I don't know what triggered this situation. Because it was me, I know it was 3/4 my fault. But understanding was not my greatest suit then. So something said, and I said something, and then I went into the bedroom and closed the door and locked it. And I said, okay, I want to come in and explain it. And he said, no, the door is locked. So being a hollow core door, I put my fist through the door. As I walked in, she called me a big shit.
I did? Did I do that?
Right. That's what she said. You're a big shit. And I said, whoa. Coming at it first. Yes, you did. You certainly did. And that stopped it right there.
That's
And
funny. I thought
it was over in 5 minutes. that was the last time we had something like that.
Last time I said that too, I think. We had 5 children, rather quickly. Johnny was born in Hackettstown, and I think we were married in December. He was born the following December 3rd. He was due in January, and he was a preemie, which gave me little problems, but it turned out he was born on Dad's birthday, which meant there was no question about his name. It had to be John W. Broeres III, because his father was first and then he was next. So then after that, Sherry was born in Hackettstown, and they were both born at the same hospital up in Newton, baptized there, same doctor, and that was a year and a half later. And then a year and a couple months later, no, a year and a day, Bob was born. A year and a day from your mom. Bob was born June the 11th. And it was then, the best part of all, we were living with my folks all this time. And so as the babies started coming, we started taking over their bedrooms because we needed some space, and Mother and Dad were delighted. They were so thrilled. Never once in all those years we lived with them complained about us or the children or how we may have affected their life. But anyway, so we're down to Bob. Then Bill came. Now he's about a year and a half, almost 2 years later. So at that point, Dad was still working at Lackawanna Leather as learning the trade in the factory. Smelly trade. And we couldn't afford to move out because we didn't have enough money. So we were looking for an apartment, hoping he would get transferred into the sales into New York. So at that point, we had taken over half of their upstairs bedrooms. So I tell the joke to my friends that after Bill, we were kicked out. Well, this beautiful apartment in the main street of Hackettstown came vacant through our friends. It was enormous, and we moved there. Pop was transferred into New York as a sales job and was earning good money for the first time. So that's the first 4. When Tom was born, let's get into this one because we were in Huntington, and we had I had a lot of problems with this Tom. They threw him aside, literally, physically. They thought he was going to die anyway, so let's forget him, and we'll work on the mother. And they did, and they saved me. And so the children, at that point, I had to go home, and I needed help, so they had to go somewhere. So Grandma took Tom. He was very sick, and she nursed him back to health, a brand new baby. And she kept him for 3 to 4 months. Sherry, Bob, and Bill went to my mother's and dad's in Hackettstown for that length of time. And Bill went with Uncle Lou and Aunt Joan in Hoboken. Now, he was 3. Many years later, we were living in the country club, and Diane said to me, "You know what Bill said? That you had to send Bill away because you couldn't afford to keep him." I said, "What?" All these years he had thought this. I mean, he didn't bother him, I don't think. So a year ago, Valentine's Day, I got a Valentine from Bill. Pretty pictures and so forth. It said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I was in Hoboken. Where were you?"
Nana had, as you mentioned, tremendous problems, and it was bleeding. She hemorrhaged, she couldn't stop. So what she did, your parents came, and they were there at the hospital, and the doctor came in, and he said, "There's nothing we can do, but there's a possibility that in Chicago they have a blood coagulating type of thing that might save her life. So what they did is they flew it from Chicago to LaGuardia, and they brought it to Huntington Hospital. And my father-in-law at that point was a very heavy smoker. And we were just talking about the problem, and we were at the fireplace, the mantelpiece, and he had his hand on the mantelpiece, and he had a pack of cigarettes in his hand, and he said, you better take it from here.
Okay. Dad put the cigarettes on the mantelpiece, and he said, I'm not quite sure of his words because I wasn't there, but he said, I will never smoke another cigarette if she lives. So whether he was bargaining with God or not, but anyway, that's what he said. And then he came to the hospital afterwards. And, oh, Mother was there, yeah. And then Dad came to the hospital room, and he said, it's up to you to fight. I said, how do I fight? I don't understand what you mean. He said, you fight, it's up to you. And with that, he left the room.
The last moment of what I remember is a priest coming in for the second time to give her the last rites. And I looked at him and I looked at the doctor, and then I saw your dad, and he said to me, she's going to live.
That's when he gave up the cigarettes, and he smoked very heavy. It's this heavy brand of British cigarettes. He never touched one after that, the rest of his life.
My advice on raising children would be to take them individually as a person.
Yeah.
And study them, you know, their temperament and how they feel, and try to understand, be understanding. However, I think you'd set ground rules with any child and make sure you follow through on those ground rules. And it's not, well, okay, or you've got to be strong, you've got to be kind, but you've got to be strong, you've got to follow through, and you've got to make it stick. Otherwise, I feel that it's fruition down the road. I mean, and you'll end up with a problem. Yeah.
I agree with everything he said. I have to admit, I think today is a very, very tough time to raise children. With everything that's going on in the world, that's not answering your question. You do the best you can with what you have at the time, and that was our belief. Just give them strong guidelines, lots of love and attention, but you're always the parent, and you're not really their friend. I don't have anything else to say about that. What I admire most about my partner, his steadfastness, his romance, being romantic, which he is, which I admire tremendously, his friendship, and his love.
I don't know how to follow that. That pretty well sums it up. I think your greatest strength for me is she stood by me.
Okay, we'll let it go with that, shall we? Let it go with that. One One of the most romantic things that Pop-Pop has done, which are one of many, I have to admit, Pop-Pop's very, very romantic, was October the 28th, year 2000, and it's all written out, and I don't know whether you can get it on camera, and I think it's perfect. That, to me, was very, very romantic.
A cigarette that bears her lipstick's traces, an airline ticket to romantic places, and still my heart has wings. These foolish things remind me of you. A tinkling piano in the next apartment, those stumbling words that told you what my heart meant, a fairground's painted swings. These foolish things remind me of you.
You came,
You saw,
you conquered me.
when you did that to me, I knew somehow this had to be the winds of March that make my heart a dancer, a telephone that rings, but who's to answer? Oh, how the ghost of you clings. These foolish things remind me of you. First daffodils and long excited cables, and candlelights on little corner tables, and still my heart has wings. These foolish things remind me of you.
One of the most happiest days of my life was probably the day I came home from 2 years of being overseas, and I saw my gal.
One of the happiest days, gosh, I've really had a lot of happy days. Truly, I'm not being funny, that's true. I think, I know what it is. One of the happiest is when we had our 50th wedding anniversary, and all of you came down. That was one of the happiest, really.
One of the most difficult and hardest days I've faced was coming home and telling my partner we had to sell our house. It had to, financially, it had to be done. The job and the market and economy. We were in
Windsor Place. Windsor Place.
Windsor Place.
I think there were several, but the one that always sticks out in my mind, I was 15 years old, and we had to move from Washington to Hackettstown, which I had discussed earlier. And I really was devastated. It did a great number on me, really mentally, and it actually lasted quite a few years in my friendships and my developing. Believe it or not, that was, to me, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to do it. My greatest accomplishment, I'd like to think, is having 5 children, 13 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. and hopefully a lot more. I'd like to think that's it.
I think my greatest accomplishment is the ability, as of a father, a grandfather, and and having great grandchildren, is to know that we, as a couple, started it all, and we're very proud to have that. Now have all our kids and our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and as a couple gets older and older, we find that those things are the strength that we have. They give us the strength that we have. She's a trip.
I'm a trip.
Nice
Do you
trip.
see what
She's
you
a
have to
trip.
look forward to? 57 years. Can you handle it?
She keeps
It gets rough, I'll tell you. It gets rough.
You keep me young, dear.
Oh, God. Yeah.
You make
Young.
me feel so young. That spring is sprung.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel so spring has sprung. And every time I see you grin, I'm such a happy individual. The moment that you speak, I wanna go play hide and seek. I wanna go and bounce the moon just like a toy balloon. You and I are just like a couple of tots running across a meadow, picking up lots of forget-me-nots. You make me feel so young. You make me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be flung. And even when I'm old and gray, I'm gonna feel the way I do today, 'cause you make me feel so young. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so spring has sprung. And every time I see you grin, I'm such a happy individual. The moment that you speak, I wanna go and play hide and seek. I wanna go and bounce the moon just like a toy balloon. You and I are just like a couple of tots running across a meadow, picking up lots of forget-me-nots. You make me feel so young. You make me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, wonderful fling to be flung. And even when I'm old and gray, I'm gonna feel the way I do today. 'Cause you make me feel so young. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so young. Ooh, you make me feel so young.
Tissues, anyone?
Yeah. Anything happy? There goes Sherry.
That,
You know, I'm really glad I came down here.
Did you come down for happy times, Sherry?
Oh, yeah.
This too
Supposed to be the
this
start-
too
start
shall
of
Well,
my
you know,
vacation.
Sherry,
It's gonna go right into the
you're getting, I think when this is told,
Oh, my.
I gotta play for him. Up a lazy river on the hill, remember that?
Yeah, I love that
I
song.
The
got
what?
that.
The Lazy River.
Oh, that's yours?
Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
favorite.
Lingo
song.
on the one, yon, 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 yon.
Yeah, I love that song. Up a lazy river like a Fu Manchu.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Bounce a balloon off, what is it? How's that song go? Just like a paper.
I don't know, dear.
No, I could sing
Been
to
a long-
it.
Serenade to her. We'll play it for you later.
I need
Many,
to
you
change
know,
the words.
Sherry, I got one for you.
I got one for you, Dad.
Many men spoke, but Fu Manchu.
Is
I
that your
listened to
first
Bobby
line or
Darin.
second?
That's my first.
Please, no more.
Oh, now we have to. Okay, there's a couple more things. Yeah, no.
Do you?
Yeah, you can move into Tom's birth and
Well, Tom's birth is in Huntington. We had
Okay,
already
you want
moved to
film yet?
Huntington when he was born. And
Did you tell them we used to sleep in drawers?
Do what?
drawers?
Didn't we sleep in drawers?
No.
Oh, where did I get that from? Oh, sorry.
We had cribs all over the
I thought
house.
we slept in drawers when we were first born. I did.
It's like
Yeah, we would shut the drawer and
Because we
then
had
look
so
for
much,
the
there were so many
socks.
clothes.
My
I
shirts,
thought Johnny and
you slept
Johnny
on
was
my
in a drawer
shirts.
and I was in a drawer.
when Tom was born,